Hi everyone and welcome to the BeJS Podcast. I'm Aymen, the founder of BeJS and your host today. I have Elian with me here. Hi Elian.
Hey, Aymen, thanks for introducing me. I'm Elian. I'm a member of the Astro core team. I'm here co-hosting the BeJS podcast with Josh today. Josh, hello.
Hi.
Hi. How are you doing? Can you introduce yourself?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Hey folks, I'm Josh Goldberg. I'm a full-time independent open source maintainer in the TypeScript ecosystem. I work on projects like typescript-eslint that let you write TypeScript code better. And I also wrote a book on TypeScript. So I'm a big fan of JavaScript.
Instantly packing up with everything you have.
Woo.
No, good job. How did you actually start getting into code and doing coding stuff? Because you do a lot of stuff.
I like coding too. I think I never, as a kid, thought computers were a viable thing, but I really liked games, and I used to hang out on the internet with strangers playing games a bunch. So I used to do those. I don't know how many viewers will recognize this, little signatures at the bottom of PHP BB forums, the like 150 by 450 images. Yeah, no one, that's not a thing anymore. But back in the day, you would have these little crafted photoshopped images below all your posts. So I needed a website to post my signatures I'd made. So I made a website, and that was fun and cool. So that's how I got started.
Really? And then what happened next?
I decided that I wanted to make a career in graphic design and arts.
Okay, so you're coming from the arts directions. Yeah.
Yeah, that lasted about a year or two in high school. And then I realized, A, I was not good at that. And B, the career salary expectations were not as good as programming. And at the same time, I also took a high school computer science Java class, which I really liked. And that's actually what propelled me into going to college for computer science and programming.
Wow. I did not know that, actually. That's good to hear.
So how are you asking for Photoshop jobs? I got you.
Yeah, exactly. How are you enjoying
I'm so bad at
programmer's
Photoshop
life
and
now?
all of that.
Oh, it's so
there
useful.
There's a little
though.
delay here, I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead without me. I'll join back in.
It's fine. But the thing is that I hear a lot that a lot of people who started programming because they were kind of introduced to computers, etc., via gaming. I think it's kind of a funny thing, especially that no one ends up actually doing games, right?
Yeah. I have a lot of friends who got into programming because, they were on MySpace or they played Halo like I did and were in clans and whatever. But the gaming industry is actually really swamped. So a lot of people go into it and get burned out and leave and hate it. Some people find love. But yeah, I ended up kind of falling into front-end web development areas because I really enjoy that stuff. But I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for games, like as a programming medium.
Do you still play a lot
And
of
did
games?
you? Yeah, that was my question.
Do I still play games?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, wait, the lag. Yeah, once in a while. I used to be really into Halo, but the last two main series entries kind of fixed that for me. But sometimes I still play The Binding of Isaac, and my spouse and I have been trying to play games together just as a social thing, but not really. I don't really have the time. It's sad.
And did you try to build games before, like even small ones, or not really?
I actually built a game engine, which sounds much more impressive than it is, because the game engine is awful. It's truly one of the worst things I've ever created. It's laggy, it's buggy, it's not performance in any way, but it's a cool way to learn how things work. But in college, I was pretty paranoid that I wasn't going to make it as a programmer. I wasn't doing particularly well in classes. I wasn't one of those annoying people constantly bragging about how well they were doing. So I remade Mario in the browser. At the time, this was a very exciting thing that HTML5 was new and big, and wow, the browser can do stuff. So I made a remake of the original Super Mario Brothers in HTML5 and JavaScript and CSS and HTML. That went viral and got taken down by Nintendo.
still up on your profile on GitHub, right? I think I did see something about that.
Yeah, the link to the repository is there, which has a DMCA takedown. But there's also an old repo that if you go back in the history, the commits, you can see the old code. So you have to do 2 or 3 steps to get to the code, I think, because Nintendo would destroy me if you could get to it more easily.
So it went viral to the point that even Nintendo stepped out and asked you to remove it, or like, did you remove it by yourself?
Yeah, they never talked to me directly, which I'm still a little irked by. But I made the code open source, not as a statement. It was just free code hosting on GitHub. It was easier than the alternatives. And then I put the code on the website, and then the website received a DMCA takedown, the hosting company DreamHost. So they, by legal need, had to take it down until I removed the full screen Mario stuff from the website.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. Serious stuff.
Yeah, real serious. I actually got on a call with a lawyer at one point who said, you don't really have a leg to stand on legally, but I'd be happy to represent you if you wanted to try. That's when I realized I was really not in the right and should get the heck out of that situation.
Well, that's
you mentioned one thing there called open source. How did you get into open source from that point on?
Yeah. Yeah, so Full Screen Mario and other personal projects I just put on GitHub because it was free and it was easy. And I think a lot of people accidentally get into technically open source that way.
For sure.
But one of the other benefits of Full Screen Mario being open source was that other people were looking at my code. And at the time, I was very big on Reddit. I used it a lot. And people on Reddit, on I think the JavaScript and HTML subreddits, were very kind in telling me that my code had a few defects and could be made better by use of a linter. I think that was the very kind way that people on the internet phrased it back then. So that's actually how I got into static analysis, tools that look at your code without running it and let you know, hey, you made a variable and forgot to use it type stuff. So I started contributing to projects on the internet over the next few years, like publishing my own code, trying to contribute to useful code things for other people. And I just kept doing that more and more over the years.
And what are the projects that you work on most of your time, like the projects that you are more implicated in, let's say? Involved
these days it's mostly Typescript-eslint, which is the tooling that lets you run standard JavaScript tools like ESLint and Prettier on TypeScript code. I actually joined the ESLint team a few months ago as a committer, which I'm very excited about.
I saw that.
I also joined. Yeah, I mean, for me, that's a dream come true. I mean, ESLint is specifically the project people were very kindly, without any vile telling me to use. I also recently joined the Mocha team because the project wasn't being maintained over the last couple of years consistently. So
I think that was also a very weird one. It started over Twitter. I noticed that someone tweeted basically, hey, who wants to maintain Mocha? And you responded, and then suddenly you're a Mocha maintainer.
Yeah, that's exactly how it feels. It's the weirdest thing. Like, I learned to unit test JavaScript code with Mocha. Like, I know everyone uses Jest or VTest these days, but like Mocha was the thing back in the day. It's wild.
Yeah.
But still, doesn't it take a lot of like maintainership, ownership, and stewardship to own a project? Like, for instance, Mocha. You step into the project, you're instantly a maintainer. How do you go from, hey, I actually never contributed to this code. I have used it before, but now I have to maintain it. How do you go like in between those steps? There is probably 1,000 steps missing. How do you skip all of those, and how do you cope with that?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are kind of two options. One, the bad option, is to just start putting your opinions everywhere, and then you learn why they're wrong, which is not what we're trying to do. There are 3 of us. The way that we're doing it is we're trying to really ease into it. Mocha is a long-lived project, and although it's not as active as it used to be, it still has people actively using it and requesting features and bug fixes and whatnot.
For
So
sure.
we went very incrementally with small stuff first. We went through the issue tracker, just read through many or all of the issues, really all of them. And there were only a few hundred. It's not like TypeScript or React where they're just constant dozens filed a day. So we then set up a triaging system, kind of figured out the areas of issues, made labels, started triaging the issues. And now we're at the point where we're mostly done triaging the issues. There's just a few kind of tricky, nuanced ones left. And soon we'll start reviewing pull requests, which I'm really excited about. But the last thing we're going to do is money, which I want to point out because there's a common mistake people make, which is they go to a project that has money and immediately they're like, oh, I need to spend the money. But that can come a little odd because it shows that your priorities are the money first, whether or not they actually are. So we're trying to be very careful and become good stewards of the project before we start throwing singles and bills everywhere.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Go ahead, Aymen.
And so, so I wanted to ask about actually the finances of open source. Like, as someone who works on open source, can you give us a bit more like information and kind of the different processes and strategies with which open source can actually get funding? Because I guess like people spend a lot of time working on features, and so they have to be paid in some way, right?
Ideally. Yeah, no, it's
Ideally.
a really good question. I have a lot to say in it, and I'll try to pause often. Yeah, there are multiple different areas and kinds of open source. And there's a really good book called Working in Public that goes over this. But I am of the type where I tend to work on projects that aren't very monetizable. Like they're projects like, say, Astro or Nux that one could reasonably build a business around. Static analysis running in your editor is not easy or really at all doable to build a business around. The shared tools that everyone uses kind of become difficult to monetize. So I personally exist on a combination of side income, like from my book sales, royalties, and from sponsors, like personal GitHub sponsors and project GitHub sponsors and open collective income and a few other services. But most of that, the sponsors are volunteers. It's companies or people who want to do the right thing, or in the case of companies, much more often want to get their name and logo and link on a README. So that's where we are today.
One of your sponsors.
And honestly, Elian, thank you. You've been a consistent supporter over the years, and I really appreciate it. The money means a lot to me.
Yeah, you do a lot of crazy work. Yeah. And honestly, I also know that if I get to see Josh again in real life, he'll pay me back in beers. So it's all fine.
That's what it is. It's an interest-based investment.
No, exactly. No, there is a very specific reason that I do support you, and that is because you don't have a company behind you and you still do all of that amazing work. And it's a really difficult process. Like I work in open source now. I am backed by a company to work on open source, but you are an independent open source developer. And that's so different. And I think I do have like $5 to spare a month. I spare a couple of dollars on, for instance, projects like Biome I use all the time, which is probably a direct competitor with TypeScript-eslint. But still, I do I give on both because I want linting and formatting to be better either ways. So yeah, I love to give a little bit of money to a lot of people over time.
Thanks. It's funny that word you use. Can I just interject and nitpick? You use the technically correct word in a sense, competitor, because we do some of the same things as Biome, but I like to think of us as neighbors. And eventually I'll write a long-winded blog post about this because, and I know you agree with this, although we might be quote unquote competing for adoption or usage, the point of the industry is not capitalist in nature, the way we use it. The point is we're trying to make things better for people. So like whether it's Biome or ESLint or whatever, whoever is able to push forward the state of the industry, that's the important bits. So like we actively, when requested and when we can, work with teams like Biome to help them and to learn from them in linting and formatting. It's a very synergistic kind of industry. It was just part of what I love about it.
A very, very good thing that you held up there, because that's exactly the same thing I feel. Well, and you know that, of course, because we talk a lot. But that's very much the same thing I feel about open source and front-end frameworks in general. For instance, we have Solid.js now, we have React now, we have Vue, we have this, we have that. We have so many things, and we have Astro, and then we have Next.js. And should I use this? Should I use that? Use whatever you want. Use whatever that works for you. We just want you to have the best experience to build your website, and in a sense, the end user should be as happy as possible. How they get there is not my problem. We just want to drive the web forwards. And that's typically how I see all of the open source projects in general. And that's why I also don't feel bad about sponsoring both TypeScript, ESLint, and BeJS.
Yeah, as long as you sponsor us more, right? I could. It's honestly much more akin to a group of researchers rather than a group of companies when you think about it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's the end goal that we want to reach, not where we are now.
Yeah.
And you're mentioning the fact that different projects are kind of neighbors and not competitors. And I really love to see that. Like there were several times when you see on Twitter someone from, I don't know, Next or from Quick talking about how and helping actually a team from another framework to actually progress and make an even better developer experience or better performance, etc. And I think that this kind of collaboration wouldn't be viable in non-open source projects, I would say. Like I wouldn't see different startups that are working on the same thing kind of helping each other, right?
Yeah. It's ludicrous to think about.
Yeah, I agree. So I wanted to touch upon your other activities. You mentioned that you wrote a book about TypeScript. Can you tell us what was like? How did the story start? Like, at what point did you decide? Okay, I'm going to write a book.
I never really. It wasn't my idea. I was a few years ago. At the time, I was working at Codecademy over in New York City, and I was already starting to make a name for myself in open source. I had contributed to TSLint, the now deprecated TypeScript linter. I was writing blog posts, speaking at the occasional conference, and O'Reilly, the publisher, reached out to me saying, "Hey, we'd like an intro to TypeScript book or something like that. Can you work on this with us?" And I, of course, said yes, because at the time that was a very good idea for me, and I'm really proud of it. O'Reilly was right. At the time, they didn't have a good, JavaScript and nothing else. Now go learn TypeScript offering, which is what Learning TypeScript became. You don't need C# or Java or Ruby or any other language. Just if you know the basics of JavaScript, this will get you to TypeScript. So that's what I wrote.
And how was your process behind it? Like, how did you start working on the project? Like, did O'Reilly help for that, or like you did it on your own?
It was with a lot of help from O'Reilly. Want to shout out the editor team in particular, Rita, Fernando. They give you a lot of help in starting it. So they'll help you do, I think it's called a competitive analysis. There's probably a kinder word that one could find, like neighbors, where you look at all the other books in the area that you're trying to write in and you see what they do or don't cover. You then figure out how to position your book, what the rough table of contents looks like. And then you start on that table of contents. I forget the exact velocity average. It was something like a chapter every 3 or 5 weeks. But over the course of a year, the first 2/3 of which I was employed at Codecademy, the last third or so of which I was freelance independent, I just, in my spare time, kept chugging away at the book. It's not a direct linear line. You don't start at the beginning and finish at the end, writing in that order. You kind of do a chapter, go back, realize, oh, I missed some concept that needed to be taught, then you redo the earlier chapter, yada, yada, yada. Fortunately for me, the book was pretty similar in its end results to what I had initially sketched out. I think there were only 1 or 2 chapters that I ended up reordering and moving. But it was a really fun process, and I'd highly recommend anyone who wants to really become a deep, knowledgeable person on an area, try to figure out, even if you're not going to, how would you explain the fundamentals and important bits of that area? Like, what is the order of information, and how would you convey that information to someone who knows nothing about it yet? It's a really good process.
The book did came out in 2021, right? Something like that.
I'm gonna look that up. I don't remember. Something like
I
that.
do think
the years
so,
all
because
blend
I remember,
together.
Yeah, we have met for the first time at React Brussels 2021. No, 2022.
22.
Yeah.
2022,
And then you gave
yeah.
me the copy of the book. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So it was 2022. Okay. How long did it took you, like, from starting writing it to publishing? 2 years?
About a year.
About a year. Crazy. Long time.
Yeah. It was a good
actually
time.
very fast.
Yeah, I was going
It was
to
a little
say,
too
I
fast,
think
actually.
Yeah. Well, there is a lot
The-
of typos in it. I have noticed so much of them.
Thanks. Thank you for that one. Yeah, no, that's my greatest shame with the book. It's that I was really rushed towards the end. I had a lot of stuff going on. The key mistake I made was I waited until the very end to figure out the themes for the chapter. What I don't like in a lot of coding books is they have like foo and bar and John Smith as every example. So for learning TypeScript, I'm actually proud of this part. I chose a different theme in history of like artists or warriors or something, and then filled it with almost exclusively not white dudes, like a lot of like women, people of color, and so on. One of the few like quintessential white dude references in the book is Nickelback, because it's a 0 out of 5 rating and an example of rating. That was funny.
Oh my God.
The problem is it was so much harder than I realized to think of good themes, because I wanted to have a distinct different one each chapter, but then also finding people who aren't currently alive, because you never know who's going to end up being a total dirtbag in the future. So it was surprisingly difficult, and I waited till the end, and that's why there's so many typos. But if you buy like a revised edition of the book, or if you buy the online edition, which has updates, then they're, I think, knock on wood, all fixed, hopefully.
Oh, those exist as well. Oh, I did not know that, actually. Huh. Nice.
Yeah. Really painful
I
as an author.
I do have a question about the book, actually, in the sense that I have been asked to write a book on Astro. I turned that down.
Ooh. Oh.
Nothing special, but I don't see a reason why I should do it, since we have documentation, and our documentation is always up to date. It's actually better than I could write the whole book, because a book is written by me, whereas documentation is written by a couple of people, which one of them is me, is revised by people, is contributed by people, is always the latest and the greatest, is up to date, has the best code examples. A book is a much different format. Why would someone learn from a book instead of documentation, which is, in my eyes, more up to date, more complete, more full grown? How did you feel about doing that with TypeScript?
You know, it's funny. You always tell me how much you hate the Astro docs. I'm surprised you like. I'm kidding. Aymen?
I actually have one reason why you should maybe write a book about a certain technology, is that even now, like, there are still some people that wouldn't have the chance to have internet connection all the time, and having a book that's like having something that is available all the time whenever you need, be it on a plane, a train, wherever in the world. And so that is something. And also something else that I would like to touch on is that your way of vehiculating a certain message is unique in its sense. And so even if there are other books that might explain and introduce you to Astro, your vision and your way of explaining the topic will be unique to you. So I think like you should always try to do it.
For sure. I just don't have time for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. I agree.
Sorry, just you don't have time. Where are you now?
Holidays. But I'm working, Aymen. Yes, I'm working from Turkey right now, which is why I'm not in my usual background small bedroom. Actually, the bedroom I have here in my hotel is probably double the size that my own apartment is back in Belgium. So I'm really happy that I can enjoy the sun, that I can enjoy the big hotel room. The only downside is bad internet, which is why we sometimes have a little bit of a delay, but it's manageable. So yeah,
Ellen,
true. I don't have time, but I'm also working.
You look like one of the twin ghost things from the second Matrix. I gotta be honest. He's sitting back to a window with dreadlocks, sunglasses on. Are you sure you're getting enough sun? But no, to the question, I think it's a really good question. Why would you write a book when docs can be updated in real time? You know, between the finishing of the writing, I forget the term, but like the going solid and the publishing of Learning TypeScript, there was a new version of TypeScript which made one of the chapters points slightly outdated. It's so frustrating to write a book on
exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
I mean,
but
we
brings
have
up a good point.
Since I gave my first like big talk about Astro, we have released 3.5 majors.
That's
Astro
wild.
isn't the same anymore. So imagine that you have captured that talk I gave back then, captured it and put it into a book. It would have been so outdated, it would have been so incomplete to Astro where it is now, in a sense.
Yeah. But there are upsides to the book format. And there are upsides and downsides to every format, right? Like, I personally don't like video content. I can't pay attention. It doesn't click for me, but other people do. One of the upsides that Aymen mentioned, is offline access. And sure, docs can be made into a PWA or saved as a PDF or whatever. But like I used to work with a great organization called Unloop, shout out, in the Seattle area, and we would go to prisons to teach code. It was like a reducing the cycle of prison recidivism idea, Unloop. And those folks would have an extremely limited amount of computer time, if any. So they'd be learning a lot of the time with pencil and paper, if that. A book is just that much better. And when a technology is much more settled and stable, the way, say, TypeScript is, a decade old, no longer undergoing major revisions, it's a lot easier to write a book that you'll be confident is not going to be totally out of date in a year. Yes, and lastly, it is just a different format. It's longer, it's deeper, it lets you have more of the author's tone. Some people, myself included, prefer that for like learning a big new technology.
Yeah, that's a very good and clear answer. Yeah.
I also wanted the chance to write a book. It's good for my street cred, That, selfishly speaking, it was a really good thing for me.
I'm a published author.
Yeah.
But it works, because not everyone can write a book, right? I mean, not everyone actually does write a book.
Sure.
Yeah, so this, all of your different activities, let's say, makes you a very busy person. And so I had a question there about how do you actually organize your time between your open source work, speaking at conferences, writing a book, all of those different
sending me memes on Discord, all of it.
Well,
attending a podcast.
First of all, the podcast and the memes in that order are the most important. Everything else is, of course, secondary. Well, I mean, it's a good question. That's part of why I went independent, because when you work for a company, you get a lot of benefits, like you get the real paycheck and benefits. Hopefully you get mentors, mentees, teams, support around you. But there's a lot of overhead to that. You're working on the company's stuff, the company's projects. You're partaking in the corporate machine. And I wanted to focus more of my time on open source things. I wanted to go speak at more conferences. I wanted to have more time to work on book stuff. I wanted to just network and socialize on the internet. So I think most of my professional life has been a cycle of taking on too much work and then shedding the stuff that I probably shouldn't be doing. And at one point, it got to the pro-con balance sheet where I could make a living after some initial ramp-up time of 1 or 2 years in open source, and it was no longer worth it for me to keep working at a company when what I really wanted to do was to work on, shared projects that help make development a little better. So that's where I am now.
I wanted to touch on that. Like, it is public in a sense. You have published your financials on this year. I don't think you did it last. No, you did it last year as well, I think. why do you do it, and do you think it will inspire others? Do you have a certain reason to do it? And I really am interested in your motivation to do it. Let me say it like that.
Well, let me ask you, Ashley, why is it of interest to you? Because this will help me answer.
Good question. I just like to read it because I'm interested if I would be able to do it. I'm not, because I'm working in a company. It's a different story, but I'm interested. I see you do so much stuff, and I don't get to see you being compensated enough. Let me say it like that. That's why I read yours. But for instance, it's different because right now we're seeing a trend where conferences are starting, well, non-profit conferences are starting to also open source their financials. And it's really good because they show to the world what it costs to organize a conference, how much it costs to fly someone over to speak, how their income is, and all of that stuff. I'm interested just because I'm interested from both. One, I partake in a lot of conferences, and two, I do a lot of open source, so it's interesting to me if I could do it independently.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You answered my question, or your question, quite well. Thank you. Those are all reasons. Yeah. It's helpful for people to understand, oh, why should I give this rando on the internet $5 a month or some project $50 from the corporate budget? It's helpful for people to understand what it actually would take, because a lot of folks express interest in going full-time open source and have no idea what that entails. They hear that, okay, it's impossible and everyone will hate you and you'll make no money. And no, it's actually possible to be somewhat not hated by some and to make some money. And also, it's just a really good form of motivation.
Yeah, exactly. Your reason is to, one, motivate yourself, two, inspire others or informate others about, hey, you can do this, this is how I do it, and this is what I earn. And it's not to be a show off. Or on the other side, whatever side you can take, it can be, hey, I earn $1 million and I'm an independent open source developer. It can also be like, hey, I earn less than a minimum wage and I'm an open source developer. Please sponsor me. And it's none of both.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Interesting.
I really enjoyed saying that as a software developer with almost a decade of experience, I earn minimum wage. I can no longer say that, but last year that was my big accomplishment. It brought me so much joy. It confused the heck out of my older relatives who did not understand our industry at all.
Yeah, open source is let's say it's a craft that isn't the most understandable by a lot of people.
Yeah. And that's part of why I do it too. I want people to understand, this is how the editor squiggly is made, This is what goes into the tooling that you and your company literally rely on to make money. This is why you should sponsor us.
Yeah, for sure. And they probably also don't always know that is you. And actually, that's really cool that GitHub introduced a feature that can analyze your dependencies, sees who is the maintainer of it, and then advises you to, hey, this person is a maintainer of 7 of your projects. Maybe you should consider sponsoring them. That's a really good thing to do. And then there is another thing I noted in the things you said is that you take on a little bit too much work sometimes, which is one, a thing that I've noticed as being your personal friend, but also two, I've seen your GitHub profile, and three, you always complain to me. No, I've just noted that you're also hard on yourself. But also last week you published your 2023 year in review and your 2024 goals. What went wrong in 2023 for you? It seemed to be too much of conferences, too much travel,
yes,
too much hassle going on. Yeah. Tell us more.
I'm a very privileged and lucky person in that many of the things that are good for me professionally are also things that bring me personal joy and happiness. And I really can't understate how fortunate I am, and many of us are, in that very narrow, specific sense. I mean, I am terrible at self-motivation. It's partially a me thing, partially ADHD, who knows? But like, if I wasn't good at coding, or if coding wasn't lucrative, I would be in a much worse position in life. So I've kind of allowed myself to become very motivated to do the things I enjoy and then roll with that in a very fortunate sense. But then what you end up is, with a lot of people who this applies to, which is a lot of people, you get to the point where we're doing what we love, and that phrase, do what you love, you won't work a day in your life, is horse crap. You end up working constantly every day because that's what you love. That's what you're motivated by. You have to keep doing it. If you don't do it, someone else will. If you don't do it, it's not going to be good enough. Oh no. So
Exactly.
I fall into that trap very easily. And one of those traps is going to conferences. I applied to every conference that could possibly accept me because I don't know if I'm going to get to any, and I need to, and this is how I'm going to make my life. And if I don't, I won't make any money as an open source maintainer, and no one will know about me and my projects. And then I went to like a travel conference every 2 weeks for most of the year, and it was just heck on my body, and I will never do that again. A lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
It's actually, I think it's actually some kind of trend. Like you see a lot of international speakers. There is 1 year where they would do like almost all the conferences that exist on Earth, and then the year after they are like, yeah, no, I'm dead.
Nope.
So this year I'm going to relax and do maybe just 10 conferences. But 10 conferences is still quite a lot, I think.
Yeah,
So,
that's a conference a month.
Yeah, it's yeah. Also,
I would live for a conference a
personally
month.
think-
I really would enjoy it, I think.
That's the thing, right? Like when you're new and getting started, oh my God,
Yeah,
getting to
probably.
any conference, let alone once a season or a month, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And then 3 years later, you're like, this is horse. I've done this already. I can't do it anymore. Yeah.
Probably.
But I think it's also like you travel a lot to conferences in Europe, if I'm not mistaken, and I think that is still way more tiring than local conferences, especially in Europe, because
Yeah.
like from Belgium, everything is like 2 hours in
Yeah.
all of Europe.
We are
by
lucky.
plane.
Yeah.
So it's super easy to get everywhere, and also like especially from Brussels, France, Germany, and the Netherlands, it's like just a train ride. So it makes things way easier than a 12 hours plane to take,
Yeah.
and jet lag and all of that.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Which,
Yeah.
by the way, brings me to a question: like, how do you have a system in place to avoid being too tired for a conference talk, or being too jet lagged, or do you have any system for that, or like you go with the flow?
A lifetime of insomnia.
Oh,
That's my secret.
choice.
I'm always tired. I really am. No, but I love traveling. It's fun. You get to meet new people like you two. Logistically or I don't know, professionally speaking, the further away the place is, the more likely it's a new set of people and connections. And when you're in a somewhat influence-based profession, like trying to get money as an open source maintainer, meeting new people is really important and useful. So I benefit from it very much so. And Europe's not even the furthest place from me. I went to Australia a few times over the last few years, and that place, A, best coffee, B, wonderful people, wonderful group of developers.
I really want to go there as well. I have family living there actually, and they have a conference as well. I think it's called Web Summit, whatever. I want to go. Yeah,
Web directions.
that one.
You just offended an entire continent, Elian.
I do that all the time by writing a U in color or in behavior, whatever. It
How
happens.
dare you?
Yeah. British English.
yeah, and so Elian mentioned, and I think we were talking a bit about it before we started recording, that you publish your goals for 2024. So can you tell us a bit more about your goals? And then I have a few questions about some of them.
Sure. There are 3 sections of them. There's like ecosystem projects, there's personal or like less high impact projects, and then like community and personal stuff. So for the ecosystem projects, it's TypeScript, ESLint, Mocha. Those are the 3 big projects that have names that make the eyebrows go up that I want to have impact on. And I'll give the TypeScript ESLint stuff and pause. For TS ESLint, the 2 biggest user pains that I constantly hear about on Twitter, on our Discord, and so on. One is that it's a real pain in the butt to configure us to be as powerful as we can be. Like using type information, integrating with TypeScript is still hard to configure. So we have this new experimental option called the project service that I want to stabilize this year. And then also we have a bunch of rules around promises that aren't as configurable as people need, because most, but not all people are wrong to ask you to configure them. And it's that last slice that's hard to get right. So I'm hopeful that by the end of this year, it'll be really easy, straightforward, and good to configure us with type information to lint your promises adequately. That's like my banner level goal for TSESlint for the year. Yeah.
Nice. And what about your personal goals?
Once a month for conferences. I want to give a really good, like a great to excellent talk at each of the conferences, or at least once a month that I speak at. I think I gave a lot of talks last year, and especially as I got more tired and rushed towards the end of the year, the quality suffered. I have a natural stage presence. I'm all excitable, and I make eye contact with everyone in the audience like they say you should. But the actual stuff I'm saying isn't always the most useful or relatable. Also, I need to speak slower. So I want to really, do a great job, like really craft each conference talk this year to be excellent. I want people to leave thinking, God dang, that was a good talk. Also, I care about the stuff he said.
Very relatable. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah, as someone who received a lot of your proposals, something that I noticed, that I noticed in the topics that you usually apply with is that they are very, very niche in some way. And I think it's kind of also why people don't think that much about sponsoring tools like ESLint or Prettier or stuff like that. And the reason is that actually most of the developers end up almost never even configuring ESLint or TypeScript or Prettier, and let's not talk about writing rules for them, because most of the developers usually work in setups where you either have everything already set up for you, or you are going to start with Next or whatever that will already give you everything set up for you. And so I think as developers we need to actually get involved more and start thinking more about these tools, but also maybe for you, like to find a way to like send the message, but while keeping it very concrete to what people are using on a daily basis. So I think, what you were saying is a very good idea. And I wanted to touch on one of your personal goals that Elian mentioned earlier, and that's that you wanted to get up at before 7 each day. First, why would you do that to yourself? Second, I know that some people like to wake up early to get some work, personal work done, or they have their routine before going to work or before starting to work, because usually people have kind of stand up to attend to or some meetings in the morning, and so you are limited by time. But you, as an independent open source developer, I guess you kind of have your own schedule, right? So why try to get up earlier if that's not part of your natural behavior?
Because human beings are animals. And if I don't get up at a consistent time, I get up at an organic time that's natural to me, which is noon.
That bad?
Yeah. No, I like getting up early. It's not easy. I don't particularly enjoy it for those first 20 minutes of half awakeness, but it means that I can have a nice breakfast. I get a good start to the day. I get work done before people wake up around me, and then it means that I finish work earlier, and I don't feel like I've spent most of my day working when I finish at like 6 or something. Leave at like 4 or 5, go to the gym, get back in time to cook dinner, go to bed at 9 or 10. It's nice. I'm old now, you know. I'm becoming like my parents, the thing that I always dreaded and feared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Luckily, I'm still young. I can enjoy life.
Elian doesn't know about that.
Elian sipping wine in palm tree lined hotel over here.
Hey. It's not wine. This is just water, by the way. Just to make sure.
Oh, it's a Blanc.
It's 5 in the evening, and they start randomly drilling next doors. What's happening?
Renovations in your fancy hotel.
Yeah, I guess.
Sounds like a casino heist is going on.
What the fuck is happening? Okay, but I think it's done. But maybe I should mute myself in case it happens again.
Bye.
So
nice talking with you.
I think.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we usually kind of conclude our podcast with a few questions about the future. And since you're one of our, let's say, best listener or audience,
Our biggest fan.
So, yes, exactly.
Your biggest fan. I listen to all the episodes so that I can do better than everyone else. That's actually the motivation. It's that I want to make sure that I know exactly what works or doesn't work for this format. And I've already messed it up. I've spoken too long. I haven't had enough rapport. I'm already berating myself internally. This is terrible.
No, that's totally
We're gonna have to
fine.
do it again.
That's totally fine. But do you know the questions, Josh? What is the question? The first question that we always ask everyone. Well, the first question.
Oh God.
Yeah,
I don't remember the order. Is it 5 years of tech? What's it going to look like in 5 years?
That's the second one. The first one is the first one is what are the technologies or libraries or whatever that you are most excited about?
Dang, you're right.
Current
I should have known.
Trends.
I was debating for this one for myself. Should I answer with the things that I personally work on with TypeScript, ESLint?
You really did research.
Yeah. But no, it's a good question. I think that I am honestly really excited about TypeScript ESLint. I think that once we make the configuring experience good and we continue to do goodwill ambassador DevRel work with other framework and library authors, it's going to continue to slowly rise in popularity, kind of like a cult classic. I think in general that JavaScript tooling is getting better all around. Like things are getting easier and easier. So between Astro continuing to get more fully featured and more stable, and React server components becoming hopefully stable this coming year, I think that there's no one particular technology that I'm particularly excited about. I think just generally the act of being a front-end developer is going to be a lot smoother in 2024 or 2025.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Oh, that's a good take. I can fully acknowledge and agree with that. Yeah. Smart move.
I totally agree with that, but I think it will also become a bit more, how can I say, a bit more difficult maybe to become kind of proficient with certain technologies, because now it's as a front-end developer, if you work with frameworks like Next, etc., you don't only have access to JavaScript, but you also can have access to backend and databases, etc., and security, and you have to think about authentication and all of that, which if you were working in a only front-end developer, you might not need to know everything about. And so I think a lot of education for all of these topics will be necessary to be able to be proficient with React server components, etc. So I think it's super nice, but at the same time, it's a lot of other things you have to know about.
Can I drop a hot take?
Yes, for sure.
I'm under the impression this is good for podcast engagement. Let me hype it up a bit. I think we always needed to know those things, and it's the inevitable consolidation that's happening. It was never the case that a person could, be a front-end developer across the industry and expect to not have to ever deal with database security and so on, in top of the state management, styling, and so on. It's just that now the way the industry works is we find a new set of problems, iterate on all these different random wacky ways of doing it, and figure out some of the best approaches, and then unify those best approaches into our frameworks. So the same way that we moved from like create React apps and Vite style things to Astro Remix Next.js style, we're now moving from mostly dealing with the front end with a bit of server to really integrating with the server. So yeah, you're right. To be a Next.js expert, you now need to know more about server streaming and hydration and use client versus use server and caching. But you already needed to know those areas. It's just before it was both the abstract concepts and a dozen different implementations, half of which are internal to your company, rather than the canonical way to do it in your framework or frameworks of choice. So yeah, I agree. I think it's really, really, really important to know those things and getting easier over time to have a solid understanding of them.
Good point. And fair.
Nice.
Yeah. Like it.
And
Okay,
then
second
we go to our
question.
second question.
Yeah.
How do you see tech in 5 years? Like web development, mostly.
I think it'll be about the same.
The same.
Do you guys know
Just-
Have you heard of the Gartner hype cycle?
No.
The Gartner hype cycle is a term. It's not proven, but I believe in it, for how any new flashy area of technology or innovation or whatnot gets received by the people using it. First, there's a peak of inflated expectations where everyone's all excited about it. It's the latest flashy thing. We use it for everything. That's what, for example, AI currently is experiencing. After that, you get to the trough of disillusionment, where you realize all the downsides of the technology. Oh my God, this is not a panacea. It's not going to cure all your woes and fix everything for you. That's what blockchain is currently in, and I suspect will remain in for a while because blockchain. After that, you get your slope of enlightenment. People have figured out the pros and the cons. We learn how to do it, and then you get the plateau of productivity. I think that because we are currently at a very large peak of inflated expectations for AI, we're going to have a real big trough of disillusionment. And that, I think, will last us a while. That's not to say AI isn't fantastic and amazing. It's just that we're using AI all the time and everywhere, and we're going to naturally, people will get bored of it and bored of hearing about it and will backlash. So I think in 5-10 years... Yeah, I don't need AI everywhere. There are places it's good and places it's not. Let's figure that out. So I think in 5-10 years, we're going to see very similar dev tooling to how we see it now. We're going to see AI at the fringes of it, to fill in the gaps where static analysis, traditional stuff can't. But I don't think that we're going to, in 5 years, be dictating our Shopify apps to our computer through our minds or whatnot. The industry does not work that quickly.
True.
Yeah.
You're
Nice.
obviously the
And
first one that was able to research the question.
Yeah.
And
Well,
yeah,
I
but
get really annoyed about it. Because people are constantly pooping on the internet about how this is the next biggest thing and, oh my God, React is dead or stupid hot takes.
Yeah.
Things are always so multidimensional. And then one of the real annoying parts of being in the tech industry and listening to people on Twitter is that everything gets distilled down into these really narrow, small things. And you know what? Only a Sith deals in absolutes, man. Like it's really complex stuff that takes a while to really shake up.
Wasn't that literally the last message you sent to me last night when I went to sleep? Only Sith deals in absolutes or only Jedi, whatever?
Yeah.
I remember that.
Taylor Facino was getting all mad about Star Wars and the prequels.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good one.
And because you researched the two questions that we usually ask, I have a third question that I would like to ask you. As someone who actually works on TypeScript tooling, what do you think about the types as comments proposal of TC39?
You've done your research. I'm so excited about this. No, it's a really exciting proposal. For those who aren't familiar with it or even TypeScript, right now JavaScript is a language that's constantly, every year, having a little bit of stuff added to it. And because JavaScript doesn't have types or any concept of a type system, the community has written actually multiple different proposals or ways, languages that are like JavaScript, but add in some types. And then when you compile that syntax, you get out JavaScript. TypeScript is by far the most popular one today. So the proposal in TC39, which is the committee that works on JavaScript that adds those things each year, is very early stage. Even if it gets accepted, which is not a guarantee, it will take years and years. The proposal is to add a new set of comments to JavaScript where the syntax looks basically like what TypeScript and other equivalents like Flow look like, that allow you, like, it's a specific place to put types syntax. It's not a proposal for a type system. It's not a proposal for TypeScript in JavaScript. It's just a place for languages like TypeScript to make it easier to write those languages. And I think that's fantastic. I think one of the bigger pains with using TypeScript is that on the server, you can't just run your TS files directly. You have to register some loader in Node, or you have to transpile to JS. And this would just make it easier to run TypeScript, or to run a competitor to TypeScript, which I think would be really good for the industry to see more innovation there. So yeah, I'm excited about it. I hope it happens within the next 2 decades. We'll see.
Okay, quick hot take, since we have time. How do you feel about big frameworks like, for instance, Svelte moving off TypeScript to systems like purely JSDoc to annotate types and such?
They're still using TypeScript. Got bad news for the TypeScript haters, the 4 of them in the world. You're nodding because we've talked about this, I know. So there was internet drama a few months ago, I forget now, where a few frameworks, like a couple of big ones, around the same time moved off of, quote unquote, off of TypeScript. One of them I want to say was Svelte.
Svelte,
all that they did,
the biggest one as well.
Great. Yeah, the biggest one. Love Svelte. I mean, I don't personally love or use Svelte, but I know a lot of people love it, and for that, I really respect them as a project. But they switched the syntax that they used to declare their type annotations. That's what they did. They switched from TS, TypeScript syntax and files, to JSDoc, which is like a semi-formalized way of using JavaScript comments. The downside is that JSDoc is just an awful way to declare TypeScript types. It's not good. It's really verbose. There are things that are less well supported. It's really annoying to use. The tooling isn't as good. But it's still supported by TypeScript. And the upside is that you no longer have to have that annoying transpile from TS to JS step. So what I'm inferring, and we can all infer happened, is that the Svelte team got annoyed having to deal with tooling and determined that the downside of having to write their types in JSDoc was lesser than the downside of having to transpile from TS to JS. So yeah, that's a reasonable decision. I personally have never been in a situation where that math has added up that way for me, but I trust the Svelte team. I know they're very good. So if it works for them, it works for them. Yeah. I would just never make that decision because I prefer, TypeScript syntax.
Yeah, but you also know TypeScript inside out and can do anything with it. I've seen your personal website and it's not a pleasure to work on.
Well, that's because I don't have the time or energy to learn Astro. And so I just make the code bad until someone like Elian steps. Oh no, I'm revealing my secret agenda.
Yeah, well, it happens.
But no, that's such a salient point. There is no one who can learn all the tooling. There never has been, never will be. I can become quote unquote expert level in TypeScript and make asinine mistakes with Astro in the same breath because who has the time for all this? So if the team just doesn't have the time, I'm not saying this is Svelte, but if a team just doesn't have the time to become experts on TypeScript, then maybe, using JSDoc is the right investment for them, pending having the time to really learn TypeScript. Maybe it's a good, first step in that direction.
I like it. Good take.
Thanks. You as well.
Okay, so I think we're at the end of our podcast, and so
can I give one more hot take?
Ooh.
Yes, go for it.
Oh boy, this is not a criticism of you, but a lot of podcasts have had a lot of hot takes drop about React, and I want to put my opinion on React forward because I think it's good engagement, and I get annoyed a lot about this. People make a lot of incorrect statements about React server components turning React into something it's not, or saying that you have to now use a server with React. I just want to put it out there that React server components is purely additive to React. It adds a new way of running it on the server. so that you can stream and they'll do all that fancy stuff. But we should not conflate the ideals of RSC with the implementation details of how it has been rolled out. People try RSC with Next.js, switching from pages to app. They get these weird, confusing errors because arguably it's still kind of a beta thing. It's not really ready for production per a lot of people trying it. And then they think, oh no, React server component sucks and it makes it impossible to write spas. No, the problem is the Next.js implementation is early stage. And if you wanted to, you could still use Vite for React without RSC. And it just really annoys me when people conflate implementation and ideals. The ideals are fine. It's the implementation that's just been, rocky.
Yeah.
As is always the case when you're rolling out some giant new paradigm shift or addition. That's me. You can cut that from the podcast if you want. I just wanted to get that off my chest.
No.
We don't. Actually, I totally agree with this because I mean, I work on several projects using React, and some of them are using Next. But I also work on 2 or 3 different projects that are still just React SPAs, and no one is even thinking about React server components in that setup because we don't need it. And the good thing that I really like about React is that even now, class components still work. Like you would still be able to take an app that uses class components, and it would still work without any issue.
Yeah.
And I think I don't see why people are being so crazy about React changing and not being what it is, because it is what it used to be. It's just like people improved some areas that you can opt in to. Even with Next, like you could even have stuff in your pages directory and stuff in your app directory and do whatever you want.
People online just like to make a lot of hot takes and a lot of opinions about a lot of stuff that they actually don't really know what they're talking about. And that's kind of the feeling that I get from it. And it's totally fine. And I see a lot of things happening and I see a lot of people getting frustrated, and it's totally fine. But in general, they're actually just making more and more general people concerned or confused than they would actually do with bringing one official statement out and nothing else. But that's what happens with internet, I guess.
Yeah. You get the good and the bad, and it's horrible trying to decipher which is which.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think we're at the end of the podcast. Josh, before we leave, where can people reach you?
You can reach me at hi.joshuakgoldberg.com.
No, don't go there.
No, you can reach me as... No, don't, please. Don't ruin it for everyone.
Because
Josh always says it on his live streams as well. And then I'm always like, what happens?
Wait.
Because I'm always the only one that knows what happens. Good one, yeah.
Silence falls upon the room. No, I'm Joshua K. Goldberg on basically everything. .com, Twitter, Fastodon is my Mastodon server, Blue Sky, Twitch, YouTube. I will say, though, I'm probably cutting out my Twitch streaming. It was in my blog post referenced because I just don't have the time for it. But I am, in general, Joshua K. Goldberg.
Cool. I will also add that to the notes so that people can find you easily. Before we leave, I would like to, as usual, mention our next upcoming conference, React Paris. So check it out at react.paris.com. No, it's react.paris. And we have amazing speakers coming from all over the world to share their knowledge about the new hot takes about React.
Yeah. We will have Attila from earlier. We will have Alexandra from earlier on the podcast. And Anthony Fu, which is a big one. Myself, which is the biggest one of them all. And then let me think of another few. Oh, Tejas, of course, is also a very big one. And a couple of other very good speakers. But for the full
Yeah,
lineup,
we're
you can
also
go
having-
to react.parrots.
We're
Yeah.
also having Joshua Camus and Sean Dye. So it's
Yeah,
going to be
true.
awesome. So check it out. And
Yeah.
see you in the next podcast. Thank you, Elian. Thank you, Josh. See you.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, Aymen. See you back in Belgium.
Bye. Enjoy the sun.